Can I see you again?
I didn't come to Seoul looking for love. If anything, love was the last thing on my mind. The city was beautiful, fast, and full of opportunities. Every day felt like a race between work, language classes, and trying to build a life in a country that still felt unfamiliar. I barely had time for myself. Romance wasn't part of the plan. Then one rainy Thursday evening, everything changed. If someone had told me that a single moment could completely alter the direction of my life, I would have laughed. But that's exactly what happened. The rain had started unexpectedly while I was leaving a bookstore near the Han River. Within minutes, the streets were crowded with people running for cover. I pulled my coat tighter and hurried toward the nearest bus stop. That's when I crashed into someone. Hard. My coffee flew from my hand. His phone hit the pavement. For a second, neither of us moved. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," I blurted out. The man bent down to pick up his phone while I scrambled to collect my things. "It's fine," he said calmly. His voice was deep, smooth. I looked up and completely froze. Not because he was famous. Not because he was rich. Not because he was Seoul's most desired bachelor. I didn't know any of that yet. I froze because he was the most handsome man I had ever seen. Tall, sharp features, dark eyes that seemed to notice everything. For a brief second, our eyes locked. The world around us somehow became quieter. Then his phone rang. The moment disappeared. He glanced at the screen and sighed. "Looks like my evening just got worse." I laughed despite myself. Trust me, mine too. That earned a smile. A real one. The kind of smile that makes you instantly feel comfortable around someone. Then maybe we're both having bad luck today. Seems that way. For reasons I couldn't explain, neither of us walked away immediately. We stood there talking while the rain continued falling around us. 5 minutes turned into 10. 10 turned into 20. It felt strangely easy, like talking to an old friend. No pressure. No pretending. No awkwardness. Just conversation. Eventually, a black luxury car pulled up beside us. The driver's door opened instantly. A man in a suit stepped out. His expression looked relieved. "There you are, sir." "Sir?" The stranger looked annoyed. The suited man quickly handed him an umbrella. That's when I noticed several people nearby staring. Some even pulled out their phones. The atmosphere shifted immediately. The stranger noticed it too. His relaxed smile disappeared. "Looks like I should go." I nodded. "Yeah, probably." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he surprised me. "Can I see you again?" I blinked. "What?" His eyes held mine. Without the collision this time. My heart skipped. Just once. A tiny, dangerous skip. I should have said no. I barely knew him. I didn't even know his name. But something inside me whispered that if I walked away now, I would regret it. So I smiled. "Maybe." He laughed. Then he climbed into the waiting car. Within seconds, it disappeared into the rainy Seoul night. I stood there watching until the taillights vanished. Only then did I realize something strange. The entire bus stop was staring at me. A young woman nearby looked shocked. "Do you know who that was?" I frowned. "No." Her jaw dropped. That was Kang Min-jun. The name meant absolutely nothing to me. At least not then. I had no idea that I had just met the man every woman in Seoul dreamed about. And I definitely had no idea that he was about to turn my entire world upside down. The next morning, I forgot about him. At least I tried to. Life had a way of demanding attention. My alarm went off at 6:30. I rushed through breakfast, grabbed my bag, and headed out for work. The mysterious stranger from the rain was the last thing on my mind. That lasted until lunch. I was sitting with my friend Sophia at a small cafe when she suddenly froze while scrolling through her phone. Her eyes widened. Then she looked at me, then back at her phone, then at me again. "Jane." "What?" "Tell me you're joking." I frowned. "What are you talking about?" Without saying a word, she shoved her phone into my hands. The moment I looked at the screen, my stomach dropped. There he was, the man from the rain. The same dark eyes, the same smile, the same face. Only now he was wearing a tailored black suit and standing in front of dozens of cameras. The headline underneath made even less sense. Seoul's most eligible bachelor spotted in public after months of avoiding the press. I blinked. What exactly am I looking at? Sophia nearly choked. Jane, that's Kang Min-jun. I remembered the name from the previous night. So? She stared at me in disbelief. So? I nodded. Yeah. So? Jane, every woman in Korea knows who Kang Min-jun is. Apparently, I was the only exception. Over the next 20 minutes, Sophia gave me a crash course on the man I'd accidentally spilled coffee on. Founder of a rapidly growing technology company, young billionaire, magazine covers, television interviews, charity ambassador, one of the most influential young businessmen in Asia, and, according to millions of women online, one of the most attractive men alive. I honestly thought she was exaggerating. Then she showed me social media. Thousands of fan pages, millions of followers, endless videos, articles, photos, interviews. The internet seemed obsessed with him. What is wrong with people? I asked. Sophia laughed. Easy for you to say. You literally met him. I bumped into him. You talked for 20 minutes. It was raining. You exchanged smiles. I groaned. She was impossible. Still, as the day continued, I found myself thinking about him. Not because of the articles. Not because of the money. Not because of the attention. The man in those headlines didn't feel like the person I had met. The Kang Min-jun described online seemed perfect. Untouchable. Carefully polished. Almost unreal. The man standing in the rain had seemed different. More relaxed. More human. Almost lonely. The thought stayed with me. 3 days later, I saw him again. This time, it wasn't an accident. I had just finished work when someone called my name. I turned, and there he was, standing outside my office building. My heart immediately betrayed me. One look, one smile, and suddenly I couldn't remember a single intelligent thing to say. He looked amused. Hi. I laughed nervously. Hi. You're difficult to find. That's probably because most people aren't trying. Fair point. For a second we simply looked at each other. Neither of us seemed eager to leave. Then he held up 2 coffee cups. I figured I owed you one. I smiled. You technically owe me a shirt too. He looked down at my clothes. I can arrange that. I laughed. His smile widened. And for the first time, I noticed something. Whenever he smiled naturally, he looked younger. Less like a celebrity, more like a regular man. A very attractive regular man. But still, a man. We ended up walking through the city for hours. No security, no cameras, no interviews, just conversation. I learned he loved late-night drives. He learned I was terrible at cooking Korean food. He admitted he hated formal events. I admitted I still got lost on the subway. By the end of the evening, my cheeks hurt from laughing. I couldn't remember the last time talking to someone had felt so easy. As the weeks passed, our meetings became more frequent. Coffee after work, weekend walks, late-night phone calls. Small moments that slowly became the best parts of my day. And somewhere along the way, something dangerous started happening. I stopped seeing Kang Min-jun, the celebrity. I started seeing Min-jun, the man who checked if I got home safely. The man who remembered little things I mentioned. The man who listened carefully when I spoke. The man whose eyes softened whenever he looked at me. The problem was that the rest of the world still saw Seoul's most desired bachelor. And the closer we became, the more impossible it was to ignore the attention surrounding him. Women approached him everywhere. Fans stopped him for photos. People whispered whenever he entered a room. Sometimes they looked at me too, trying to figure out why I was there. What they didn't realize was that I was asking myself the exact same question. One evening, after dinner, we sat beside the Han River watching the city lights reflect across the water. The breeze was cool. The city was quiet. For once, nobody recognized him. Nobody interrupted us. Nobody stared. Min-jun looked unusually thoughtful. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why don't you treat me differently? I laughed. What does that even mean? He looked out at the river. Most people want something from me. The honesty in his voice caught me off guard. I don't. I know. His answer came immediately. No hesitation. No doubt. Just certainty. For some reason, that made my heart race. Slowly, he turned toward me. The city lights reflected in his eyes. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Something had changed. The air felt different. The silence felt different. The way he looked at me felt different. And for the very first time, I began to realize something that terrified me. I wasn't just becoming friends with Seoul's most desired bachelor. I was falling for him. And judging by the way he was looking at me that night, he might have been falling too. Falling for someone is dangerous. Falling for someone you were never supposed to have is even worse. After that night by the Han River, I tried convincing myself that I was imagining things. Maybe I had misunderstood the way Min-jun looked at me. Maybe the long conversations didn't mean anything. Maybe the butterflies in my stomach were entirely one-sided. Maybe. But deep down, I knew the truth. Something was changing between us, and neither of us seemed willing to talk about it. The strange thing was that our friendship only grew stronger. Every morning started with a message from him. Good morning. Sometimes it was simple. Sometimes it was a joke. Sometimes it was a photo of whatever ridiculous breakfast he was pretending to eat. One morning he sent a picture of a completely burnt piece of toast. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. Please tell me you didn't make that. His reply came immediately. I did. You own a company worth billions and can't make toast? Success comes with sacrifices. Clearly. You're laughing. A little. Mission accomplished. That became our routine. Small conversations. Small moments. The kind that slowly become important without you realizing it. Soon, I found myself checking my phone more often. Looking for his messages. Waiting for his calls. Smiling at things that weren't even that funny. One Saturday afternoon, he invited me to join him at a street food market. I almost said no. Not because I didn't want to go. Because I knew spending more time with him would only make things harder. But I said yes anyway. The moment I arrived, I understood why people liked being around him. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He wasn't trying to act important. He simply enjoyed life. He spent 20 minutes arguing with a food vendor about who made the best spicy rice cakes. Lost. Then demanded a rematch. Lost again. I laughed until my stomach hurt. You know nobody's ever told you no before. That's not true. You're a terrible liar. He grinned. I prefer optimistic. As we continued walking through the crowded market, I noticed something. For the first time since meeting him, nobody seemed to recognize him. No cameras. No fans. No reporters. Just us. The freedom clearly made him happy. At one point, he stopped walking. I turned around. What? His expression softened. Nothing. That doesn't look like nothing. He hesitated, then smiled. I like this. What? This. I frowned. The food? No. The market? No. Then what? He looked directly at me. His voice became quieter. Being normal. For a second, my heart squeezed. Because suddenly I understood. Everyone knew Kang Min-jun. Very few people knew Min-jun. The man behind the headlines. The man behind the money. The man behind the perfect image. And somehow, without trying, I had become one of those people. That realization stayed with me for days. As the weeks passed, our friendship became the center of both our lives. Movie nights. Long walks. Coffee dates that definitely weren't dates. At least that's what we kept telling ourselves. One evening, we got caught in another rainstorm. Unlike the first time, neither of us ran. We ended up standing beneath a small shop awning while rain poured across the city. Min-jun looked at the street, then at me, then back at the street. A smile slowly appeared. What? He shook his head. Do you realize this is exactly how we met? I laughed. You mean when I attacked you with coffee? You make it sound violent. It was. I survived. Barely. For several seconds we simply stood there laughing. Then the laughter faded. The silence that followed felt different. Warmer. More intimate. The kind of silence that only exists between people who genuinely enjoy being together. I became aware of how close he was standing. Close enough to reach out. Close enough to touch. Close enough to make my pulse race. His eyes met mine. Neither of us looked away. The world seemed to disappear. The traffic, the rain, the people around us. Everything faded. For one dangerous moment, it felt like he was going to kiss me. Then someone's phone rang nearby. The spell broke instantly. We both stepped back, neither mentioning what had almost happened, neither forgetting it. A few days later, Sophia cornered me after work. "You like him?" I nearly choked.
No.
"Jane."
No.
"You absolutely do." I looked away. That was answer enough. Sophia sighed dramatically. "You know what the problem is?"
What?
"He likes you too." I froze.
No.
"Yes." "You're guessing." "I'm not." I hated how confident she sounded, because a part of me was starting to believe it. The signs were impossible to ignore. The way he looked for me in every room, the way he smiled whenever I arrived, the way his voice changed when we spoke, the way he remembered every little detail about me. Still, neither of us crossed the line. Maybe we were scared. Maybe we didn't want to ruin what we already had. Maybe we both knew that once friendship became something more, there would be no going back. Then came the night everything almost changed. Min-jun invited me to a private rooftop dinner. Nothing extravagant. Just food, music, conversation. The city lights glowing beneath us. For hours we talked about everything. Our childhoods, our fears, our dreams, the lives we imagined for ourselves before reality took over. At some point, the conversation became quieter, more personal, more honest. Min-jun stared out at the skyline. "Can I tell you something?" "Of course." He took a slow breath, then turned toward me. His expression was unlike anything I'd seen before. No confidence, no charm, no perfect billionaire image. Just vulnerability, pure and unguarded. "When I met you, I thought you'd disappear after that night." I smiled softly. "So did I." His eyes never left mine. "I'm glad you didn't." My heart nearly stopped. The city lights blurred around me. The entire world seemed to narrow down to that single moment. Just him. Just us. And the truth neither of us could hide anymore. Because somewhere between friendship and love, we had become something neither of us expected. Something neither of us planned. And something that was becoming impossible to resist. The first rumor appeared on a Tuesday morning. Neither of us noticed it at first. While I was busy at work and Min-jun was locked inside meetings, the internet had already started doing what it did best. Watching.
Guessing.
Inventing stories. It started with a single photograph. A blurry image of us leaving a restaurant together. Then another. A photo of us walking beside the Han River. Then a third. A picture of us laughing outside a coffee shop. By lunchtime, those photos were everywhere. By evening, they were trending. And by the next morning, half of Seoul seemed convinced they knew everything about our relationship. The funny part? There wasn't even a relationship. At least not officially. Yet somehow strangers online had already created entire stories about us. Some claimed we were secretly dating. Others insisted I was a gold digger. A few were convinced I was an actress hired by his company. The theories became more ridiculous every hour. I was scrolling through them when Sophia snatched my phone away. "Stop reading comments." "I'm not. You've been staring at them for 20 minutes. I sighed. Unfortunately, she was right. Most of the comments weren't kind. Thousands of people who had never met me suddenly had opinions about me, about my appearance, my intentions, my worth. The experience was strange, painful, and honestly a little frightening. I wasn't famous. I wasn't used to strangers discussing my life. Yet overnight, I had become part of a conversation involving millions of people. That evening, my phone rang. I didn't even need to check the screen. It was him. "Hey." His voice sounded tense. "Hey." A brief silence followed. Then he sighed. "You've seen it? The internet seems very interested in us." "I'm sorry." His apology surprised me. "For what?" "For dragging you into this." I leaned back in my chair. You didn't drag me anywhere.
Still.
I could hear the frustration in his voice. For the first time since meeting him, he sounded genuinely angry.
Not at me.
At the situation. At the attention. At the loss of privacy. After a moment, I smiled. On the bright side, apparently I'm a secret billionaire. That earned a laugh. A real one. The tension immediately eased. That was my favorite theory, too. For the next hour, we talked about everything except the rumors. By the time we hung up, I felt better.
Safer. Stronger.
That was becoming his gift. Whenever life became complicated, somehow he made it feel manageable. Unfortunately, the internet wasn't finished with us. Not even close. The next few weeks became increasingly difficult. Every public appearance turned into speculation. Every photograph became a headline. Every interaction became a story. People wanted answers. The media wanted answers. His fans wanted answers. Everyone wanted to know the same thing. Who was the woman spending so much time with Kang Min-jun? The pressure became impossible to ignore. One evening, Min-jun invited me to a charity gala. I almost declined. Events like that weren't my world. Neither were cameras. Neither were reporters. But he asked. And somehow saying no to him was becoming harder. The moment we arrived, I regretted everything. Flashes exploded from every direction. Cameras followed our movements. Reporters shouted questions. My heart immediately started racing. I wasn't prepared for this.
Not even remotely.
Then I felt something warm brush against my hand. I looked down. Min-jun had quietly reached for it. Not holding it. Not publicly. Just enough contact to reassure me. Enough to say, I'm here. The simple gesture calmed me instantly. For the rest of the evening, we stayed close.
Talking.
Laughing. Escaping awkward conversations whenever possible. At one point, I found myself standing alone on a balcony, overlooking the city. The cool air felt wonderful after hours inside. I was enjoying the silence when another woman stepped outside. Beautiful, elegant, confident. The kind of woman who looked like she belonged on magazine covers. She smiled politely. You must be Jane. Something about her tone immediately put me on guard. Yes. She nodded slowly. I've heard a lot about you. I wasn't sure whether that was a compliment or a warning. Then she looked back toward the ballroom. Toward Min-jun. He usually gets bored of people much faster. There it was. The warning. The challenge. The jealousy. I suddenly understood exactly who she was. Not an enemy. Not really. Just another person who wanted what she couldn't have. When she walked away, I expected to feel insecure. Instead, I felt something surprising. Confidence. Because unlike everyone else in that room, I knew the real Min-jun. Not the headlines. Not the billionaire. Not the celebrity. The man. And there was a difference. A huge one. Later that night, as the gala ended, we slipped away through a private exit. The city was quiet. The streets nearly empty. For several minutes, we simply walked. Neither eager for the night to end. Finally, Min-jun spoke. Someone bothered you tonight. I looked at him. You noticed? I always notice. My heart skipped. There was something dangerous about the way he said that. Something personal. Something intimate. I looked away before he could see the effect he was having on me. Unfortunately, he already knew. His smile gave him away. You do realize they're jealous, right? I laughed. Jealous of what? His expression softened. Of you. The answer came so naturally that I stopped walking. He stopped too. The city lights reflected in his eyes. Neither of us spoke. The air between us suddenly felt charged.
Alive. Different.
The kind of moment that changes everything. Then he stepped closer. Not enough to touch. Just enough to make my pulse race.
Jane.
The way he said my name made it sound important.
Like it meant something.
Like I meant something. For one impossible moment, I thought he was finally going to tell me how he felt. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. Then his phone rang. The timing was almost cruel. He closed his eyes. I laughed.
He groaned.
Neither of us could believe it. The moment shattered instantly. Reality returned. But something had changed. Something neither of us could pretend anymore. The rumors were no longer the biggest problem. The headlines weren't the problem. The jealous hearts weren't the problem. The real problem was much simpler. Every day we spent together made it harder to hide the truth. Because somewhere along the way, friendship had stopped being enough. And sooner or later, one of us was going to have to admit it. There are moments in life when you realize you don't truly know someone. Not because they lied. Not because they pretended to be someone else. But because they've spent years hiding the parts of themselves that hurt the most. I discovered Min-jun's secret completely by accident. And once I knew it, I understood him in a way I never had before. It happened on a cold Friday evening. We had plans to meet for dinner. Nothing unusual. By then, spending time together had become part of our lives. I arrived at the restaurant first. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Then 20. That wasn't like him. Min-jun was many things, but he was never careless about my time. I checked my phone. No messages. No missed calls. For some reason, a feeling of unease settled in my stomach. Just as I was considering leaving, my phone finally rang. It wasn't Min-jun. It was his assistant. The moment I answered, I knew something was wrong. "Jane, I'm sorry to call you." My heart immediately started racing. What happened? There was a pause. Mr. Kang had to leave unexpectedly. Is he okay? Another pause. Longer this time. Physically, yes. Physically. The choice of words didn't escape me. What happened? His assistant hesitated, then sighed. It's his father's anniversary. I frowned. Anniversary? The anniversary of his death. For several seconds I couldn't speak. Min-jun had never mentioned his father. Not once. Not in all our conversations. Not in all the stories we had shared. Not in all the late nights when we talked about life. Nothing. The realization hit me immediately. This wasn't a subject he avoided by accident. This was a wound. A deep one. That night I didn't hear from him. Nor the next morning. Or the next afternoon. For the first time since we'd met, he disappeared. No messages. No calls. Nothing. I tried not to worry. Failed completely. By Sunday evening, I couldn't take it anymore. I called. No answer. I called again. Still nothing. Then finally, several hours later, my phone lit up. A single text.
I'm sorry.
I stared at the screen, then immediately replied. Where are you? The answer arrived moments later. At home. I didn't ask permission. I simply went. An hour later, I was standing outside his apartment. When the door opened, my heart broke. He looked exhausted. Not physically. Emotionally. The confident man I knew seemed gone. His shoulders were tense. His eyes looked tired. For the first time since meeting him, he looked vulnerable. Completely vulnerable. Neither of us spoke at first. Then I held up a bag of food. You forgot dinner 2 days ago. For a moment, he simply stared at me. Then something in his expression softened. And he stepped aside. Inside, the apartment was quiet. Almost too quiet. We sat in the living room eating in silence. Not uncomfortable silence. The kind shared between people who care about each other. Eventually, Min-jun put down his chopsticks. I should have called. I nodded. Probably. A faint smile appeared. Then disappeared. The sadness returned. After several seconds, he spoke again. My father died when I was 17. The words were calm.
Too calm.
As if he'd repeated them 1,000 times. As if emotion had become dangerous. I listened quietly. He was everything to me. His eyes remained fixed on the floor. He built the company. I blinked. What? Min-jun nodded. My father started everything. I had always assumed Min-jun created the empire himself. Apparently not. He worked every day of his life. A small smile appeared. He loved impossible challenges. The smile faded. He also ignored every warning from his doctors. My chest tightened. I already knew where the story was going. He collapsed during a business trip. The room became silent. Painfully silent. He never came home. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then something happened that I'd never seen before. His voice cracked. Only slightly. But enough. Enough to reveal years of buried grief, years of pain, years of loneliness. I spent years trying to become him. His eyes finally met mine. The sadness there was overwhelming. I thought if I worked hard enough, succeeded enough, achieved enough. His voice faded. I finished the sentence quietly. You could make up for losing him. A bitter smile appeared. Something like that. At that moment, everything finally made sense. The long hours, the relentless ambition, the pressure he placed on himself, the loneliness, the perfection. It wasn't about success. It was about grief. A grief he never allowed himself to process. Because if he stopped moving forward, he'd have to face what he lost. And that terrified him. For the next 2 hours, he told me stories. Stories he'd never shared publicly. Stories nobody else knew. About his father teaching him to ride a bicycle. Teaching him business. Teaching him responsibility. Teaching him how to believe in himself. By the time he finished, tears were shining in his eyes. He quickly looked away, embarrassed. I reached for his hand without thinking. The moment our fingers touched, he froze.
So did I.
Neither of us pulled away. The room became very quiet, very still. His hand tightened slightly around mine. A simple gesture, yet somehow it felt more intimate than anything we'd shared before. Minutes passed. Neither of us moved. Then he finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. I've never told anyone that. I swallowed. Why? His eyes held mine. Because nobody ever felt safe enough. My heart nearly stopped. The honesty in his voice was impossible to ignore. This wasn't about friendship anymore. Not really. It hadn't been for a long time. For several seconds, we simply looked at each other. No masks. No walls. No pretending. Just truth. Raw and vulnerable. Then something happened. Slowly, carefully. Min-jun lifted his free hand and brushed a loose strand of hair behind my ear. The gesture was gentle, tender, and devastatingly intimate. Every breath caught in my chest. The world seemed to disappear. There was only him. Only us. Only the space between us. His eyes dropped briefly to my lips, then returned to my eyes. The air itself felt different.
Charged. Alive.
One small movement. That's all it would have taken. One small movement, and everything would change. But instead, he closed his eyes and pulled back. Not because he didn't want to kiss me. That much was obvious. He pulled back because he was afraid. Afraid of risking what we had. Afraid of losing the one person who truly knew him. The realization made my chest ache. Because I was afraid too. Neither of us spoke about it. Neither of us needed to. The moment had already said everything. When I finally left that night, Min-jun walked me to the door. For several seconds we stood there, neither wanting to say goodbye. Then he smiled. A small, genuine smile. The first real smile I'd seen from him in days. Thank you. I shook my head. You don't have to thank me. Yes, I do. His eyes softened. You stayed. 3 simple words. Yet somehow they carried the weight of everything. Because maybe that was the secret he never told anyone. Not the death. Not the grief. Not the loneliness. The real secret was this. For all the fame, money, and admiration surrounding him, he had spent years believing people only loved the image, the success, the status, the billionaire. And for the first time in a very long time, someone had chosen to stay for the man behind it all. Neither of us knew it then, but that night changed everything. Because after learning his deepest secret, keeping our hearts hidden was becoming impossible. There comes a point when feelings become impossible to hide. No matter how careful you are.
No matter how hard you try.
Eventually, your heart stops listening to reason. After the night Min-jun told me about his father, something shifted between us. Not dramatically. Not all at once. But enough that neither of us could ignore it anymore. The walls we'd spent months maintaining were beginning to crack. And every day made it harder to pretend we were just friends. The funny thing was that nothing officially changed. We still met for coffee. Still exchanged morning texts. Still spent hours talking about absolutely nothing. Yet everything felt different. Every smile lasted a little longer. Every touch lingered a little more. Every goodbye became a little harder. One evening, we found ourselves back at the Han River. It had become our place. The city lights shimmered across the water while a cool breeze drifted through the night. For a while, we sat quietly, neither of us speaking. Comfortable silence had become one of my favorite things about being with him. Then Min-jun suddenly laughed. What? He shook his head. I was just thinking. Dangerous. I know. That earned a smile. His eyes remained on the river. Do you remember the first day we met? I laughed. The coffee attack. That's what we're calling it now. That's exactly what we're calling it. He smiled. Then his expression softened. You changed my life. The words hit me harder than they should have. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. I looked at him. Really looked at him. The man who had become the most important part of my life, without me realizing it. The man whose messages brightened my mornings. The man whose voice calmed my worst days. The man who somehow made every ordinary moment feel special. My heart knew the truth long before my mind accepted it. I loved him. Completely.
Terrifyingly.
Hopelessly. And judging by the way he was looking at me, he loved me too. The realization hung between us. Unspoken. Powerful. Impossible to ignore. Neither of us looked away. The world around us seemed to disappear. The city. The traffic. The distant sounds of people walking nearby. Everything faded. Until there was only him. Only us. Only this moment. Slowly, Min-jun reached for my hand. His fingers intertwined with mine. This time neither of us pretended it was accidental. Neither of us pulled away. The warmth of his hand sent a familiar rush through my chest. Then he spoke. Quietly.
Carefully.
As if each word mattered. Jane. My heart raced. Yeah. His eyes searched mine. For courage. For reassurance. For permission. And then he finally said the words we'd both been avoiding. I think I've been in love with you for a long time. For a second, time stopped. Everything inside me froze. Not because I was shocked, because hearing it out loud made it real. After months of stolen glances, months of almost moments, months of trying to protect our friendship, the truth was finally standing between us. My eyes filled with tears before I could stop them. Min-jun immediately looked worried. Hey. A nervous smile appeared. Those are good tears, right? I laughed through them. Yes. His shoulders relaxed. Thank God. I squeezed his hand, then took a deep breath. A very necessary breath.
Because my heart was trying to escape my chest.
I love you too. The words felt like freedom, like finally coming home. For a moment, neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. We simply sat there smiling like two people who had spent far too long pretending. Then Min-jun laughed. A genuine, happy laugh. The kind I'd never heard before. I can't believe we waited this long. I laughed too. We're both idiots. That's fair. Very fair. His smile widened. Then slowly, carefully, he reached up and brushed his thumb across my cheek. Every nerve in my body noticed. The look in his eyes made my pulse race. There was no uncertainty anymore. No confusion. No fear. Only love. Pure and undeniable. And finally, after everything we'd been through, he leaned forward. The kiss was gentle.
Soft.
Unhurried. Not dramatic. Not perfect. Just real. The kind of kiss that says everything words can't. Months of feelings. Months of hope. Months of waiting. All finally finding their way into one beautiful moment. When we pulled apart, neither of us could stop smiling. The city lights reflected in his eyes. And for the first time since meeting him, he looked completely at peace.
So did I.
The weeks that followed became some of the happiest days of my life. We were finally together. No more pretending. No more hiding from our feelings. Just us. Simple things suddenly felt extraordinary. Morning coffee became romantic. Walks became dates. Movie nights became excuses to sit closer. Every moment felt brighter because we were sharing it. For the first time, I understood why people wrote songs about love. why they wrote books, why they crossed oceans. Because when it's real, love changes everything. But happiness has a way of attracting attention, especially when one of the people involved happens to be Seoul's most famous bachelor. At first, we tried keeping our relationship private. Not secret, just private. Unfortunately, the world had other plans. The photographs returned. The rumors intensified. The headlines grew louder. And this time, they weren't guessing anymore. People knew. The reaction was immediate. Some celebrated. Others didn't. Messages flooded social media. Articles appeared daily. Opinions came from every direction. People who knew nothing about us suddenly believed they knew everything. One night, after reading another ridiculous headline, I sighed and tossed my phone aside. Min-jun glanced over. Bad. Worst one yet.
He laughed.
That's impressive. I leaned against him. You know, your fans think I hypnotized you. His laughter echoed through the apartment. Honestly, that explanation is better than some of the others. I smiled. Then his expression softened. He wrapped an arm around me, pulling me closer.
Protectively. Comfortingly.
As if reminding me I wasn't facing any of this alone. We'll be okay.
His voice was calm.
Confident.
Certain.
And in that moment I believed him. Because love felt stronger than the headlines. Stronger than the rumors. Stronger than the opinions of strangers. What neither of us realized was that life was about to test that belief. In ways we never expected. Because just when everything seemed perfect, the biggest storm of our lives was quietly approaching. And it was powerful enough to threaten everything we'd built together. For a while, it felt like we had beaten the odds. The rumors hadn't broken us. The attention hadn't broken us. The pressure hadn't broken us. Somehow, despite everything, Min-jun and I were happy. Genuinely happy. Maybe that's why neither of us saw the storm coming. Life has a strange way of doing that. It waits until you're comfortable, until you're hopeful. Then it tests how strong you really are. The scandal began on an ordinary Monday morning. I was halfway through my coffee when Sophia called. The moment I answered, I knew something was wrong. Jane. Her voice was tense. Too tense. What happened? Have you seen the news? My stomach immediately tightened.
No.
Don't panic. People only say that when there's a reason to panic. I opened my laptop. Within seconds, I understood. Every major news site was carrying the same story. Every social media platform was exploding. Every headline featured the same name, Kang Min-jun. For several seconds, I simply stared at the screen, unable to process what I was reading. The articles claimed that years earlier, one of Min-jun's companies had been involved in a financial controversy. Anonymous sources were accusing him of covering up information. Former employees were giving interviews. Commentators were demanding investigations. The story was spreading faster than wildfire, and the internet had already reached its verdict.
Guilty.
I immediately called him. No answer. Again. No answer. A third time. Straight to voicemail. My heart sank. The entire day passed in a blur. More articles appeared. More accusations surfaced. Television stations discussed him nonstop. His stock prices began falling. Investors publicly questioned his leadership. By evening, the situation had become impossible to ignore. Then finally, just before midnight, my phone rang. Min-jun. I answered instantly. Where are you? His voice sounded exhausted. Office. Of course. The man probably hadn't left his office all day. Are you okay? A short laugh escaped him. Not a happy laugh.
No.
The honesty hurt. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I asked the only question that mattered. Did you do what they're saying? The silence that followed felt endless. Then his answer came.
No.
Not defensive.
Not angry. Just honest.
Simple.
Certain.
I believed him immediately. Without hesitation. Without doubt. Because I knew him. The real him. Not the headlines. Not the billionaire. The man. And that man wasn't capable of what people were accusing him of. The next few weeks became a nightmare. Every day brought another attack. Another accusation. Another headline. The media surrounded his office. Reporters followed him everywhere. Even my own life became affected. Strangers recognized me. Some supported us. Others didn't. Comments online became crueler. People questioned my motives, my character, my relationship. Friends I barely knew suddenly offered opinions. People who had never met us acted as though they understood everything. The pressure became relentless. One evening, after another brutal day, I arrived at Min-jun's apartment. The moment he opened the door, I barely recognized him. Dark circles under his eyes. Tension in his face. Exhaustion in every movement. For the first time since meeting him, he looked defeated. Not weak, just tired. Tired in a way that comes from fighting every day without seeing an end. I stepped inside. Neither of us spoke. Then suddenly he wrapped his arms around me, holding me tighter than usual, as if he was afraid, as if he needed reassurance. For several moments we simply stood there. The silence said everything. Finally he pulled back. His eyes met mine. "I'm sorry." I frowned. "For what?"
This.
He gestured toward the world outside. "The attention. The stress. The way this is affecting your life." I shook my head. "Stop."
His jaw tightened.
"Jane."
No.
I stepped closer, looking directly into his eyes. "I chose this." Something flickered across his face.
Pain.
Gratitude.
Love.
All at once. "You shouldn't have to." "Maybe." I reached for his hand. "But I want to." For a second, he looked away. And that's when I realized something. The scandal wasn't what frightened him most.
Losing me was.
That realization broke my heart. Because despite everything happening around us, he was still worrying about me. Still putting me first. Still protecting me. Even when nobody was protecting him. A few days later, things became worse. Much worse. A major investor publicly withdrew support. The company's stock dropped again. News stations called it the beginning of the end. Industry experts predicted disaster. Everywhere Min-jun turned, people expected him to fail. That night, we sat together in silence. The television played softly in the background. Neither of us was really watching. Eventually Min-jun spoke. His voice was unusually calm. "If things get worse." I immediately knew where this was going, and I hated it. "If things get worse," he continued, "you should leave." I stared at him. "What?" His expression remained serious. "You shouldn't get dragged down with me." For several seconds, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Then anger appeared. Real anger. The kind that comes from caring too much. I stood up. "Are you serious?" His eyes followed me.
Jane. No.
I shook my head.
No.
"Listen."
No.
The word echoed through the room. For the first time in our relationship, I was furious. Not because of the scandal. Because of him. Because after everything we'd shared, he still didn't understand. "You think I stayed because life was easy?" Silence. "You think I fell in love with you because you were successful?" His eyes lowered. "You think all of this changes how I feel?" Still silence. I stepped closer, tears filling my eyes. "Min-jun, I loved you before the headlines." My voice cracked. "I loved you before the rumors." Another tear escaped. "And I'll love you after them too." For a moment, neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. Then something inside him finally broke. Not dramatically. Quietly. Humanly. His eyes filled. The walls he'd been holding up for weeks finally collapsed. And for the first time since the scandal began, he allowed himself to believe he wasn't alone. He pulled me into his arms, holding me tightly, as if letting go would be impossible. Neither of us cared about the tears anymore. Neither of us cared about pride. Only us. Only this moment. Only the promise hidden inside it. Whatever happened next, we'd face it together. Unfortunately, life wasn't finished testing us. Because the very next week, a shocking development would change everything. A development neither of us saw coming. One powerful enough to force a choice neither of us wanted to make. A choice that would separate us when we needed each other most. And for the first time since we fell in love, there was a real chance our story might not survive. Sometimes love isn't tested by distance. Sometimes it's tested by whether you're willing to let someone go. The week after our conversation, everything changed. The scandal that had been hanging over Min-jun's life for months suddenly took a new turn. A former executive from his company came forward, not with accusations, with evidence. Evidence proving that the financial misconduct had happened, but it hadn't been Min-jun. The responsibility pointed toward a small group of executives who had hidden information for years. For the first time, the truth was beginning to surface. It should have been good news. Instead, it created an entirely new problem. Government investigators launched a formal inquiry. Corporate partners demanded answers. International investors requested meetings. Lawyers became involved. The situation exploded beyond anything we had imagined. Min-jun was no longer just fighting for his reputation. He was fighting for the future of the company his father had built. The company that carried his family's name. The company thousands of employees depended on. And suddenly, every hour of every day belonged to that fight. Our dinners disappeared. Our late-night walks disappeared. Even our phone calls became shorter. Not because he stopped caring. Because he was drowning. I could hear it in his voice. The exhaustion. The pressure. The fear he never admitted. The burden was crushing him. And there was nothing I could do except watch. One evening, nearly 3 weeks after we'd last spent real time together, he finally called. "Can I see you?" The question sounded fragile. Almost desperate. Of course. An hour later we met at the Han River. Our place. The place where everything had begun. The place where we'd fallen in love. The place that somehow felt sacred now. When I saw him standing by the water, my heart hurt. He looked thinner, more tired, more distant. Not emotionally, physically. As if the weight of the world had been sitting on his shoulders for months. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. We simply stood there looking at each other, trying to make up for weeks of absence. Then finally he smiled. A tired smile, but real. "I missed you." The honesty in his voice nearly broke me. "I missed you too."
His eyes softened.
For a moment, I thought he was going to hug me. Instead, he looked away toward the river. The silence felt wrong, heavy, dangerous. My stomach tightened. Something was coming. I could feel it. Then he finally spoke. "The board wants me to leave." The words hit me like a punch.
What?
He nodded. Temporarily. I stared at him. "Leave where?" "America." The world seemed to stop. The river, the city, the lights, everything.
Gone.
Only that single word remained. America. Thousands of kilometers away. Months away. Maybe longer. My chest tightened painfully. How long? His silence gave me the answer before his words did. "We don't know." I looked away, suddenly unable to breathe properly. This couldn't be happening.
Not now.
Not after everything we'd survived. Not when we finally had each other. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he continued. "The investigation is spreading internationally." His voice sounded hollow. "I have meetings, depositions, legal reviews." Every word felt like another goodbye. "I have to go." I hated those words. Not because they were wrong. Because they were true. I knew him. I knew how much responsibility meant to him. How much his father's legacy meant to him. How much protecting the company mattered. If there had been another option, he would have taken it. There wasn't. A tear escaped before I could stop it. Min-jun immediately stepped closer. His expression shattered. "Jane." I laughed weakly through my tears. "I know." My voice cracked. "I know you have to go." That somehow made everything worse. Because there was no villain. No betrayal. No mistake. Just life. And sometimes life is cruel enough. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. Then Min-jun reached for my hand, holding it tightly, as if he could somehow memorize the feeling, as if he was afraid to forget. "I'm scared." The confession surprised me, not because he was scared, because he admitted it. Min-jun rarely admitted fear, especially his own. I squeezed his hand. "Me too." His eyes met mine. filled with emotions neither of us could fully express.
Love.
Sadness. Frustration.
Hope.
All tangled together. The next 2 weeks passed far too quickly. Every spare moment belonged to us. Coffee dates, late-night walks, long conversations, quiet dinners, small memories we were desperately trying to create before time ran out. Neither of us wanted to talk about the departure, but it was always there, waiting, growing closer every day, until finally there were no more tomorrows left. Only goodbye. The airport was crowded. People rushed in every direction. Announcements echoed through the terminal. Yet somehow it all felt distant. Unreal. Like a dream neither of us wanted. Min-jun stood in front of me. One hand wrapped around mine. Neither willing to let go first. The final boarding call sounded overhead. Neither of us moved. I could see the conflict in his eyes. The part of him that wanted to stay. The part that knew he couldn't. Then slowly, he lifted his hand and brushed away a tear from my cheek. The gesture was so gentle, it nearly broke me. I love you.
His voice was quiet, steady, certain.
3 words. Simple words. Yet somehow they carried everything. Every memory. Every laugh. Every late-night conversation. Every kiss. Every promise. Everything. My eyes filled again. I love you too. For a second, neither of us cared about the airport, or the people, or the world. Only this moment. Only each other. Then reality returned. The boarding announcement sounded again. This time, there was no avoiding it. Min-jun closed his eyes briefly, gathering strength. When he opened them, they were shining. Not with weakness. With heartbreak. The same heartbreak I felt. Slowly, painfully, he released my hand. The moment felt wrong. Like something precious had been taken away. Then he did something unexpected. He pulled me into his arms, holding me tighter than ever before. Neither of us spoke. Words were useless now. The silence said everything. When he finally stepped back, neither of us were smiling anymore. There was simply too much pain, too much distance already forming between us. He picked up his bag, looked at me one last time, then walked away. I watched him go. One step, then another, until the crowd swallowed him completely. And just like that, he was gone. For the first time since we met in the rain, Seoul felt empty. The days that followed were harder than I expected. Harder than either of us expected. Video calls helped. Messages helped. Nothing truly replaced being together. I missed his voice, his laugh, his presence. The simple comfort of knowing he was nearby. Distance has a way of revealing just how deeply someone has become part of your life. And every day apart made one thing painfully clear. Min-jun wasn't simply the man I loved. He was home. But what neither of us knew was that while we were struggling across oceans, the truth behind the scandal was finally emerging. And when that truth became public, it would change everything, including the future we thought we had lost forever. 3 months. That's how long Min-jun and I had been apart. 3 months of video calls. 3 months of messages. 3 months of trying to convince ourselves that distance was only temporary. Some days were easier than others. Most weren't. I missed him constantly. Not in dramatic ways. In ordinary ways. I missed hearing his footsteps beside me. I missed arguing about where to eat. I missed his terrible jokes. I missed the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. I missed us. The hardest part was not knowing when things would finally end. Every time we thought the investigation was almost over, another meeting appeared. Another delay. Another complication. Still, we held on. Because that's what love does.
It holds on.
Even when everything else feels uncertain. Then one Tuesday morning, everything changed. I was on my way to work when Sophia called. She sounded like she had just won the lottery. Turn on the news. I laughed. Good morning to you too.
Jane, turn on the
news. Something in her voice made me stop walking. I pulled out my phone, opened a news app, and froze. The headline filled the screen. Investigation completely clears Kang Min-jun of all wrongdoing. My heart immediately started racing. I opened the article. Then another. Then another. Every report said the same thing. The evidence was conclusive. The executives responsible had been identified. The truth had finally been exposed. Min-jun had done nothing wrong. Nothing. Months of accusations. Months of attacks. Months of pressure.
Gone. Just like that.
Before I could process it, my phone started ringing. The screen lit up. Min-jun. I answered instantly. Neither of us spoke at first. Then I heard him laugh. Not the tired laugh I'd heard during the scandal. Not the forced laugh he'd used to stay strong. A real laugh.
Free. Happy.
The sound alone brought tears to my eyes. We did it. His voice cracked slightly, and somehow that made me cry even harder. We did. For several seconds, we simply listened to each other breathe, neither wanting to break the moment. Then he said something that made my heart stop. I'm coming home. Home. Not Seoul. Not Korea. Home. The word carried meaning. The kind of meaning that doesn't need explaining. For the first time in months, hope felt real again. The following week felt endless. Every day moved slower than the one before. Every hour felt longer. By the time Friday arrived, I thought I might lose my mind. His flight was scheduled to land at 6 in the evening. I arrived at the airport nearly an hour early, then spent most of that hour pacing. The arrival screen became my obsession. I checked it every few minutes, then every minute, then every 30 seconds. Sophia finally grabbed my shoulders. Relax. I am relaxed. She stared at me. I was very obviously not relaxed. Then suddenly people began exiting through the arrival doors. My heart nearly exploded. Families reunited. Friends hugged. Travelers rushed past. But no Min-jun. Not yet. Then I saw him. And everything else disappeared. The crowd vanished. The noise vanished. The airport vanished. There was only him, standing on the opposite side of the terminal, looking directly at me. For a moment neither of us moved. 3 months. 3 endless months. And suddenly the distance was gone. Min-jun smiled. I started running. Actually running. Ignoring every ounce of dignity I possessed.
He laughed.
Then started running too. Seconds later, I crashed into his arms. And for the second time in our story, I literally ran into Kang Min-jun. Only this time there was no spilled coffee. Only relief. Only love. Only home. He held me so tightly I thought my heart might burst. Neither of us cared who was watching. Neither of us cared about anything except the fact that we were finally together. When he pulled back, his eyes were shining. So, I laughed through happy tears. So, I missed you. I shook my head. That's all you have? He smiled.
No.
His expression suddenly became serious. Very serious. The kind that made my pulse immediately speed up. Actually, there's something I need to do. Before I could ask what he meant, he reached into his pocket. My breath caught. The entire world seemed to pause. Min-jun slowly lowered himself onto one knee. The airport erupted.
Gasps. Cheers.
People pulling out phones. None of it felt real. I simply stood there staring at him, completely speechless.
For once in my life.
Completely speechless. His eyes never left mine. Jane.
My heart pounded. Hard.
You met me when my life looked perfect. His voice remained steady. But you stayed when it wasn't. Tears blurred my vision. You saw the parts of me nobody else saw. He smiled softly. You stayed through the rumors. Another tear escaped. You stayed through the scandal. More tears. You stayed when I had nothing left to offer except myself. The airport had become silent now. Everyone listening. Everyone watching. But all I could see was him. Only him. And the love in his eyes. The same love that had started in the rain all those months ago. The same love that had survived everything. Then he opened the small box in his hand. A ring sparkled beneath the airport lights. And suddenly I couldn't breathe.
Jane.
His voice cracked. The slightest bit. Enough to reveal how much this meant. Will you marry me? I laughed. I cried. I did both at the same time. Then I nodded so hard it was probably ridiculous. Yes. The word came out instantly. Without hesitation. Without doubt. Yes. The crowd exploded into applause. Cheers echoed throughout the terminal.
Some people were crying.
Sophia was definitely crying. And honestly, so were we. Min-jun slipped the ring onto my finger, then stood up. The moment he did, I kissed him. The entire airport cheered even louder. For once, neither of us cared about headlines, or cameras, or attention, because this moment belonged to us. Months later, on a beautiful spring afternoon in Seoul, we stood together surrounded by family and friends. The ceremony wasn't extravagant.
It didn't need to be.
The most important thing was already there.
Love.
Real love. The kind built through friendship, through trust, through sacrifice, through choosing each other over and over again. As I stood facing Min-jun, I thought back to the rainy evening when we first met. One accidental collision. One spilled coffee. One unexpected conversation. That was all it took to change two lives forever. People often say fate works in mysterious ways. Maybe they're right, because out of all the people in Seoul, out of all the places we could have been, out of all the moments that could have passed unnoticed, somehow we found each other. The city's most desired bachelor, and the woman who never cared about the title. In the end, the world thought our story was about fame, about wealth, about status. They were wrong. It was always about two people who met at exactly the right moment. Two people who became friends when nobody expected it. Two people who fell in love against all odds. And two people who kept choosing each other, no matter how difficult life became. As Min-jun squeezed my hand during our vows, he smiled the same smile I had fallen in love with. The smile from the rain. The smile from the beginning. And in that moment, I knew something with absolute certainty. I hadn't just found the love of my life. I had found my forever. And this time, neither of us was ever letting go.